He called
You
her
thought you could
Basti
steal
maid
these
and
files
fired
and get
her on
away with it?
stage. He
You
forgot
are
she knew every
finished
number he
at
stole.
Globex.
I used to think some people are just born to stay in the shadows of a city like Mumbai, cleaning other people's offices, picking up other people's teacups, walking past other people's dreams as if they were never meant for them. But then I heard about Asha Rao, the girl from the slum who walked into the Sinha mansion with a mop in her hand and a degree hidden in her past. And everything I thought I knew about place and status started to crack. On paper, she was just the cleaning lady at Sinha Textiles, a family-owned textile company that had been standing on the same dusty road since her grandfather's time. Every morning, before the sun had fully clawed its way through the smog, Asha would leave the one-room kholi she shared with her 7-year-old son Kabir in a crowded chawl, tie her faded dupatta tight, and catch the overflowing local bus towards the Sinha industrial estate. She moved through the office like a ghost people had gotten used to, the kind of presence you only notice when she drops a glass or stands in the wrong place at the wrong time. The junior executives would talk over her head about targets and mergers, while she wiped their fingerprints off the table. Sometimes, when they thought she was out of earshot, they laughed about how these people from the basti are multiplying like stray dogs. One of them once said loud enough for her to hear, "At least she's smart enough to hold a mop." Yaar, not everyone in Dharavi gets that far. Asha swallowed the words like bitter medicine. She had learned, the hard way, that in this city you either bite your tongue or they bite your dignity. Still, there were moments, late at night when Kabir was asleep and the fan made that old rattling sound, when she would take out an old envelope from the steel trunk under her bed. Inside was a crumpled college ID card with her photo, younger, lighter in the eyes, and under it the words, "B.Com, topper. Rao Asha." She used to think that part of her life was a mistake, some kind of joke God played before reminding her of her real place. Her father's illness, the forced marriage to a construction worker with more debts than dreams, his death under a collapsed scaffolding, one by one. They pushed her down from classroom to kitchen, from books to brooms. At Sinha Textiles, the hierarchy was clear. Upstairs, in the glass cabin, Sat Raj Simha, the younger son, the current director, with his polished English, expensive watch, and that half smile he wore whenever he said the word staff. His wife Priya floated in and out of the building like it was a private runway, tossing comments like, "These people will never understand what it means to have class," whenever she saw Asha's dark hands scrubbing the marble. Downstairs, on the ground floor, the textile looms roared, the workers shouted over the machines, and sweat clung to everything, the true heart of the company, but also the part everyone in the fancy cabin pretended not to smell. And then there was the top floor of the Sinha mansion next door, the one nobody really talked about. People whispered about it over chai, the ghost floor, where Vikram Sinha, the elder son, lived like a prisoner since his car accident. Some said he hadn't come down in 3 years. Some said he broke anything and anyone that came close. Kamla, the old housekeeper who had served the Sinhas longer than Asha had been alive, loved to warn her, "Don't look at that balcony. Betty, that is not our world. We are down here. They are up there. Remember your place and you'll survive." Asha would nod, say, "Ji, Kamla ji," and keep her eyes on the floor. But inside, something in her always twitched when she heard those words. That day, everything felt slightly off from the moment she entered the office. The air was heavier, the security guard more distracted than usual, scrolling angrily through his phone. By mid-morning, Kamla rushed into the pantry, flustered, muttering about the cook calling in sick and Priya insisting on some detox lunch for Vikram upstairs. Someone had to take the tray to the top floor. No driver, no butler, no junior manager wanted to deal with the angry crippled sir, as they called him behind his back. Kamla's eyes landed on the nearest invisible person, Asha. "You," she snapped, thrusting the tray into her hands. "Take this to Vikram Baba's room. Don't touch anything. Don't talk too much. Just leave the food and come back. And for God's sake, don't stare at him. These people don't like being looked at." Asha's heart kicked once in her chest. She had spent months walking past the mansion, watching the lights flicker behind those high balcony doors, wondering what kind of life was trapped in there. Now she was being sent inside. Her palms went slick against the metal tray. But she said nothing. She stepped into the private lift that smelled of sandalwood and old money. Feeling the gap widen with every floor between the world she came from and the world she was about to enter. When the lift doors opened, the silence hit her first. No whir of looms, no chatter, just the dull hum of an AC and the faint sound of a television on mute. She walked down the long corridor. The family photos on the wall staring down at her, Raj cutting ribbons. Savitri ji at charity events. A younger Vikram shaking hands with politicians. At the end of the hallway, a door was half open. She could see the edge of a wheelchair, a hand gripping its armrest. And on the table nearby, stacks of files with red marks all over them in. Strangely, a dusty harmonium pushed against the wall like a memory no one touched. For a second, she thought of turning back. Who was she to walk into this room? This life? But then she remembered Kabir's school fees due next week. The landlord's warning. Kamla's voice saying, "Remember your place," and something inside her whispered. Almost stubbornly, "What if my place is not where they think it is?" She took a breath, lifted her knuckles, and knocked softly. What she didn't know, as that sound echoed into the room of a man who had given up on the world, was that this simple, hesitant knock from a slum girl would be the first crack in a wall that had stood between two lives for far too long. When the door finally swung open, the first thing Asha saw was not the man, but the wheelchair. It sat in the middle of the room like a stubborn full stop at the end of a long sentence. The curtains were half drawn. The TV playing some news channel with the volume so low the anchors' mouths moved but their voices never arrived. On the far side, near the massive window, Vikram Sinha sat with his back slightly turned, hair streaked with grey, shoulders broad but slumped in a way that told her this was not just about bones and nerves. For a second, she froze in the doorway, tray trembling just enough for the spoon to rattle. He didn't look at her, just said in a flat voice, "Leave it on the table." "No, thank you." "No, who are you?" "Nothing." Standard rich people behavior, she thought, forcing her legs to move. As she crossed the room, she noticed the details that Kamla never mentioned in her gossip, the stack of financial files with red circles and angry arrows. The untouched harmonium with a tiny Ganesh idol sitting on top. A framed newspaper clipping of a younger Vikram cutting the ribbon at a new factory unit. Once, this man had been the hero of this place. Now he wouldn't even turn his head to look at the girl carrying his lunch. She put the tray down, murmured a soft, "Sir, your food," out of habit, and turned to leave. At the door she heard him cough. A dry, irritated sound. And then he added, "Next time, ask Kamla to send someone who doesn't stare so much." The words hit like a slap she'd already learned to expect. "Gee, sir," she replied automatically, eyes on the floor, and stepped back into the corridor. In Mumbai, some insults you just fold and put in your pocket. The next time came quicker than anyone expected. That night, a storm rolled in early. The kind where the wind howls down the narrow chawl lanes and every loose cable starts dancing. Asha had stayed late to finish cleaning the upstairs corridor. Kamla had gone down to Ayu with the vegetable supplier at the gate. As Asha wiped the last of the dust from a photo frame, she heard a strange sound from Vikram's room, a heavy thud. Then a harsh choking noise that did not stop. At first she told herself, "It's not my business. If I go in and he shouts, Kamla will eat my head." Yaar, but the sound didn't go away. It got worse. There is a point where fear of losing your job and fear of watching someone die in the next room are no longer equal. Her hand moved before her brain finished arguing. She pushed the door open and saw him half slumped in his chair, face turning a frightening shade of red. Water spilled all over his lap, the glass rolling on the floor. Without thinking, her body slipped into a mode she hadn't used since her father's last asthma attack years ago. "Sir, look at me," she said sharply, stepping behind him, doing the Heimlich maneuver exactly as the nurse had shown her inside a government hospital corridor once upon a time. It was messy, not textbook perfect, but it worked. A chunk of food dislodged. He gasped, coughed hard, and dragged in air like a drowning man touching shore. She grabbed a napkin, wiped the water from his face, steadied the chair, and then, only then, realized her hands were shaking. He blinked, eyes trying to focus on her for the first time. How did you know what to do? He managed. Asthma, TB, every disease came to our house except lottery, she said, breathless, half joking, half angry at how familiar this panic felt. Government hospital teaches you many things, sir, without any fees. When she reached for the landline, he didn't stop her. She dialed Dr. Shah's number from the list pinned near the phone. Spoke quickly, gave his symptoms in clear Hindi, mentioned the medication he was on because she had read the labels while cleaning earlier. Dr. Shah promised to come, slightly surprised to hear a woman's voice he didn't recognize from that house. By the time Kamla came running upstairs, shouting, "What did you do? Why are you inside?" Asha was already at the door. He was choking, she said simply. Kamla's eyes flashed with something between fear and anger. Your job is to clean floors, not touch Malik's back. Next time, remember that, she hissed. Asha swallowed the insult, like always, but as she walked down the stairs, wet footprints on her chappals, she knew Vikram had seen something Kamla wished had stayed invisible, that the girl from the basti knew how to act when everyone else froze. The days after that incident felt different, even if nobody said it out loud. The first small sign came 3 mornings later when Kamla, grumbling, appeared in the pantry and said, "Vikram Baba wants chai. He asked for you to bring it. Don't get too excited." "Ha, it's just tea." Asha pretended to be neutral, but inside something shifted. People like Vikram didn't ask for people like her by name. She carried the steel kettle and 2 cups to the top floor, half expecting him to go back to staring at the window. Instead, when she entered, he turned his chair slightly towards her. That day, he began, awkwardly, "You handled it better than Kamla or the nurse last year." It sounded like it hurt him to admit it. Anyone would have done it. "Sir," she replied. "No," he said quietly. "Anyone didn't. Only you walked in." There was a pause, heavy but not hostile. As she poured the tea, her eyes drifted, almost by habit, to the open file on his lap. Numbers, columns, some figures circled in red. Without thinking, she frowned. "This is wrong," she muttered under her breath. "What?" he snapped, more out of surprise than anger. "Nothing, sir. Sorry." She backtracked, cursing herself. "No, say it," he insisted. Something in his tone made it less like a command and more like a challenge. So she leaned closer, finger hovering over the page but not touching it. "Here," she said, "you have shown last month's cotton purchase as 60 lakh. But the approved vendor rate and volume from the board minutes, it doesn't match. Either the vendor is fooling you or someone is adding extra zero for fun." His eyes narrowed. "You can read this?" She almost laughed. "I didn't learn ABCD just to read detergent labels." "Sir." The sarcasm slipped out before she could choke it back. Their eyes met properly for the first time. And she saw something other than pain there, curiosity. "What did you study?" he asked. B.Com, she answered, looking away. "Topper, actually. Mumbai University." She said it like a confession, as if she were admitting to stealing something. He thought she was joking. Later that evening, when he asked her to bring him some water, she quietly placed her old college ID card on the tray. For a long moment, he said nothing, just stared at that younger version of her smiling stiffly at the camera. "First rank," stamped below. "So what are you doing cleaning my office floors?" he finally asked. The answer was not new to her lips, because life doesn't check your mark sheet before slapping you. "Sir, my father's kidney, my husband's accident, dead doesn't care about rank." At home, Kabir noticed the change before anyone else. One night, as they sat on the floor eating leftover khichdi, he said, "Ma, you're smiling at your notebook again. You got promoted or what?" She looked down at the ledger she had brought from Vikram's room. Numbers neatly copied in her own hand. Red pen marking suspicious entries. "Nothing like that, beta," she said, "just helping someone with homework." "Rich people also have homework?" he asked. "Why died the richest?" she replied, ruffling his hair under the single tube light, with clotheslines crisscrossing the small room and the neighbor's TV blaring some soap opera. She felt her brain wake up again. It was like someone had switched on a fan in a room that had been closed for years. During lunch breaks, one of the junior accountants, Imran, started nodding at her a little longer than necessary. One day, as they both stood near the tea stall outside the factory gate, he lowered his voice and said, Didi, you go upstairs nowadays. No, just be careful. Some numbers in the cotton purchase file are strange. I have 2 school-going daughters. I can't ask questions, but someone should. It was a small act of courage, a Muslim clerk trusting a Dalit cleaner with a whisper that could cost him his job. Why are you telling me? She asked. He shrugged. Because you actually look at things, not just wipe them. That line stayed with her all the way up to the top floor. Bit by bit, the pattern became clear. Payments routed through a consultancy firm Raj had quietly registered in his cousin's name. Land valuation reports that didn't match the market reality the workers gossiped about over BD. Small delays in salary that people wrote off as India hai. Yaar, kya kare? Asha started staying an extra half hour in Vikram's room after her shift, going over files while he asked questions, his old managerial reflexes slowly kicking back in. Sometimes she would point at a line and he would mutter, Raj wouldn't, no, he can't be that stupid. More to himself than to her. Downstairs, of course, people noticed. Priya walked past her one afternoon, perfume heavy, sunglasses on even indoors, and smirked. Wah, our cleaning lady sits in the Malik's room now. Promotion or some other service? The sentence hung in the air, full of poison. Kamla's eyes, too, had turned sharper, counting how many times Asha took the lift up. But each time a taunt came. Asha did what she had done her whole life. She folded the pain, put it in her pocket, and kept walking. This time, though, she wasn't walking alone in the dark. Somewhere between that choking incident and the red circles on those pages, a quiet partnership had begun between a man who couldn't yet trust his own legs and a woman the world refused to trust with anything more than a mop. Nobody else knew it, but on that top floor, far above the noise of the looms and the gossip, the two of them were slowly, patiently, drawing a map out of the mess Sinha Textiles had become. By the time the real storm hit Sinha Textiles, the sky over Mumbai was perfectly clear. No thunder, no rain, just one white envelope with the bank's logo that landed on Vikram's lap like a stone. He had called Asha to his room early that morning, when she came in with his tea. She found him staring at the letter, jaw tight, knuckles white against the paper. Read it, he said, pushing it towards her. She wiped her hands on her dupatta and scanned the English, lips moving silently. Even if you've never seen a bank notice before, you can feel the threat in those words. The letter was polite, of course. Banks are always polite. But the meaning was simple: pay back the huge loan or watch us take your factory and land. Asha felt her stomach drop. They gave 30 days, she murmured. After that, she didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need her to. Vikram leaned back, eyes fixed on the ceiling. Raj took this loan to modernize, to impress some investor friends. He said bitterly, now the bank wants its money. And half of what they think is, my land is actually workers' homes. Asha thought of the rows of small quarters behind the factory. Clotheslines full of uniforms. Children racing between parked bikes. Chai sellers shouting orders. If they lose their homes because of something they never even signed, she began. The thought made her throat burn. For them, this wasn't just about a balance sheet. This was about where their kids would sleep next month. You know that feeling when you see a train coming but no one else on the platform seems to notice? That's what sat between them that morning. Downstairs, Raj responded the way men like him often do when the wall finally appears. He decided to put up a big, shiny poster on it. Within hours he had called an all-staff meeting for Saturday. In the factory compound where they usually held Diwali functions. He had a stage built, speakers installed, even a banner printed, Sinha Textiles, a new future. He walked around like a hero preparing to save his kingdom, giving instructions to the HR manager, whispering with a man in a suit Asha had never seen before, the real estate developer who had been circling the land for months. The plan was simple: sell a chunk of the factory land at a good price. Move the looms to a smaller rented building outside the city, and pretend this was all for efficiency and growth. The fact that this chunk of land included the workers' quarters, That part would be wrapped in soft words and promises of better housing later. That's how power often works here. You cover the knife with gift paper and call it an opportunity. On the day of the meeting, the compound was packed. Workers stood in the sun, wiping sweat with their gumchas, gossiping about why the high command had suddenly remembered their faces. Some thought maybe there would be a bonus announcement. Some thought the opposite. Asha stood near the back, between Imran and a group of packing women from her chawl. She wasn't supposed to be there. Technically she was support staff, not factory staff. But nobody stopped her, and Imran quietly handed her a copy of the notice HR had emailed him. Look at page 2, he murmured. Figures don't add up. Again. She glanced through the document. More of the same inflated costs. Suspicious, consultant fees, and a projected land sale value that was embarrassingly low compared to the market rate she had overheard brokers brag about outside the tea stall. Her heart began to thump. She knew there was something rotten in those numbers. And now they were about to sell it as hope. Raj walked on stage in a crisp white shirt, sleeves rolled just enough to look hands-on. Priya sat in the front row under a large umbrella, sunglasses on, as if she were judging a fashion show. Savitri was there too, sari immaculate, face carefully neutral. Years of being the matriarch had trained her to show nothing until she chose to. Raj tapped the mic, smiled with all his teeth and started talking in that smooth mix of English and Hindi rich men use when they want you to forget how sharp their words really are. My dear Sinha family, he began. These past years have been challenging for all of us. The market is changing, competition is huge, and frankly, some old decisions, he paused just enough for people to think of Vikram on the top floor, have made it hard for us to move forward. But I, as your present director, have a plan. He clicked his remote and a slide appeared on the big rented screen, colorful charts, arrows pointing upwards. He spoke of partnering with a leading real estate group, of unlocking value, and upgrading our facilities. Every sentence was dressed like a bride, shiny and loud. He avoided one word as if it were poison: eviction. Asha watched the numbers, not the man. The projected land sale value made her eyebrows knit. The promised housing allowance for workers was laughable. It wouldn't cover even a month's rent in the nearest slum. Forget a proper home. Her grip tightened around the paper. In her mind, she saw Kabir playing cricket in the narrow lane behind their room. The old weaver uncle who always saved him from bullies. The auntie who watched Kabir for free when Asha had night shifts. These people didn't live in a chart. They lived in rooms you could cross in 3 steps. There comes a point where if you stay quiet, you're not just protecting yourself anymore. You are betraying everyone who can't reach the microphone. So when Raj said, "This is the best deal we can get," believe me, the words slipped out of her mouth before fear could stop them. That's not true, sir. Her voice wasn't loud, but in a crowd that has been trained to keep its mouth shut, even a small no sounds like a slap. Heads turned. Raj stopped mid-sentence, eyes scanning until they found the source. Who said that? He demanded. Imran looked at the ground. The packing women stepped back. Asha felt everyone's breath on her neck. But she raised her hand. I did, she said, wishing her legs would stop trembling. Asha? Priya laughed, sharp and disbelieving. The cleaner? Raj forced a smile, the kind that doesn't touch the eyes. You have a question about complex financial restructuring? He asked. Every word dipped in sarcasm. Asha's cheeks burned, but she held up the sheet. I just want to say the land price you are showing is very low. Sir, the broker outside chai stall was saying this area is minimum triple. And you are saying this housing allowance will help workers find new places. But have you seen rents? Sir, in our basti, even rats are paying MS now. A few workers snorted despite themselves. The developer in the suit frowned. Raja's face tightened. He hadn't expected numbers from her. Only maybe tears. In that moment, he could have laughed, waved her off, moved on. But fragile egos don't like being poked in public. He stepped to the edge of the stage, eyes cold. Listen, Asha, he said, dropping the madam tone. You clean floors here. You think talking to my brother upstairs makes you some big chartered accountant now? There it was, said out loud. A murmur went through the crowd. Asha felt her heart drop, so he had noticed. He had been watching. I am only saying what I see. She replied quietly. Numbers don't care if hands are dirty or clean. Sir, the sentence hit him harder than she intended. You could see the anger climb his neck. You see too much for someone from the slum. He snapped. First you people come begging for jobs. Then suddenly you know more than the family that built this place? You are not just cleaning. Huh? You are climbing. On whose shoulder? I wonder? The implication hung in the air. Heavy and filthy. Asha's ears rang. He could have just fired her. Instead, in front of every worker, he almost called her characterless. Priya smiled behind her sunglasses. Enjoying the show. Kamla stared at the ground. Joe clenched, but said nothing. The HR manager shifted uneasily, but also stayed silent. That is how a woman's dignity is often killed in our country, not with a knife, but with a suggestion no one dares to challenge. Raj turned to the crowd. His voice now theatrical. See, this is what happens when you let boundaries break. Today a cleaner from the basti is questioning company strategy. Tomorrow she'll be signing your salary slips. Some people laughed shakily, the way you laugh when you're scared of being next. Then he dropped the verdict. You're fired. Asha. Effective immediately. Security. Please show her the gate. And if any of you think of joining her drama, remember who pays your wages. Two guards moved towards her. One of them, a young man who sometimes borrowed her lunchbox, couldn't meet her eyes as he reached for her elbow. Asha felt the world blur a little. She thought of arguing, but what would she say? Please insult me more slowly? She straightened her back instead. Kabir's face flashed before her again. I'm going, she said, voice steady in a way her heart was not. As they walked her through the crowd, workers moved aside, some with shame in their eyes, some with helplessness, a few with that ugly curiosity people get when they watch someone fall. You could almost hear the silent sentence in the air, Bechari. But what can we do? They had just reached the gate when a car horn cut through the noise. A black SUV rolled into the compound. Not Raj's flashy one, but an older, sturdier vehicle. The driver rushed out to open the door. And when the man inside came into view, the air changed. Even after 3 years, the workers recognized the older brother. Vikram sir, someone whispered, as if they'd seen a ghost. He was thinner than his photos. Hair more grey. But there was something in his eyes that hadn't been there in the hospital pictures that had once made the rounds on WhatsApp. Determination. He was in a wheelchair. Yes, but as he rolled forward, you could tell he was driving it himself. Not a passenger anymore. Open the gate, he called out. The security guards froze, hands still on Asha's arms. Raj, still on the stage, went pale for half a second before forcing a smile and saying into the mic, Bhai, you should have told us you were coming. We would have arranged. You arranged quite a drama already. Vikram cut in, his voice carrying across the compound without needing the microphone. Let's not add decoration to it. He looked at Asha. She's not going anywhere. Bring her back. That one sentence did more than any argument she could have made. The guard stepped back as if burned. For the first time in that whole nightmare of a day, Asha let herself breathe properly. Vikram asked for the microphone. His hands shook slightly as he took it, but his voice stayed firm. Some of you haven't seen me in years. He began, eyes sweeping over the crowd. Maybe you thought I forgot you. I didn't. I forgot myself for a while. That's true, but thanks to some people who refused to leave me in that darkness. I woke up. One of them, he nodded towards Asha, just got called a climber and a liar in front of all of you. So before we discuss land or loans, let's correct a few facts. He gestured to the side. And to everyone's surprise, Imran stepped up, carrying a laptop and a borrowed projector. The white banner behind Raj became an accidental screen. I asked Imran to help me pull the real numbers directly from the bank portal and our own system. Vikram said, I didn't inform Raj. I wanted to see who is loyal to truth and who is loyal only to face. Slide by slide, they showed it, the over-invoiced cotton purchases. The consultant company registered in Raj's cousin's name. The land valuation reports from an independent surveyor that were 3 times higher than the deal Raj had just pitched as the best we can get. Workers stared. Some angry, some shocked, some grimly satisfied to see the pattern that had been choking their wages finally given a name. Raj grabbed the spare mic. Voice high and brittle. This is all being twisted by her. He shouted, pointing at Asha. She has been poisoning you against me. Against your own brother. Using your weakness. Vikram, you always felt guilty for the accident. Now she is playing on that. Before he could finish, Vikram did something nobody expected. Maybe not even himself. He handed the mic back. Locked his hands on the armrests. And, using all the strength months of physio had built, pushed himself up. It wasn't a movie-style miracle. His legs trembled violently. His face clenched with effort. But slowly, with the help of 2 crutches waiting by his side, he stood. You could feel the silence hit the ground like rain. Even the looms in the background seemed to quiet for a second. In that breathless moment, everyone saw it. The man they had written off as finished. Taking a step back into his own story, he took one small, deliberate step forward, then another, and reached the edge of the stage. No one, he said, panting slightly but crystal clear, is manipulating me to stand up. Not in my body, not in my mind. I am here because I finally chose to face what my own brother has been doing behind my back. And I am here because a woman you call, cleaner from the basti, had more courage to speak the truth than all of you with fancy titles. His gaze burned into Raj's. You thought you could hide behind my wheelchair and their fear. But today, bhai, both of those crutches are gone. The workers looked from one brother to the other. From the numbers on the screen to Asha's tired face. You could almost hear the scale tipping. Raj opened his mouth, then closed it. For once, there was no smart line. No English phrase ready to save him. Priya's lips parted in disbelief. Her designer sunglasses slipping down just enough to show the panic in her eyes. Kamla clutched the edge of her sari, torn between the boy she had helped raise and the truth she had just watched climb down from a stage on shaky legs. And Asha, standing there with tear tracks drying on her cheeks, realized something quietly powerful. She didn't need to scream. Didn't need to win every argument. The facts were on the board. The man whose voice mattered had spoken. And the whole dirty game Raj had played using her caste, her job, her place, had just been dragged into the light where everyone could see it. It wasn't the end of the battle, that would come later, but it was the moment the war changed sides. After that day in the compound, things didn't magically become easy. Real life isn't a Bollywood movie. Nah, where one speech fixes 30 years of mess. The very next week, men in pale blue shirts with ID cards from the bank and the financial regulator started visiting the office. They didn't shout. They didn't moralize. They just asked for files and clicked photos on their tablets. That quiet was more terrifying than any drama. Raj stopped coming down to the factory floor. His shiny SUV stayed parked under the banyan tree like a showpiece nobody wanted to touch. Priya's visits, once daily, turned into whispered calls from her parents' place. Full of, what will people say, and, my kitty group is asking questions. Vikram. Savitri began spending more time with her prayer beads than at her club meetings. Watching everything with those sharp eyes mothers have when they realize one son has nearly destroyed what the other built. Inside, Asha moved like she always did, from pantry to corridor to accounts room, but the air around her had changed. Workers nodded to her now, not just as the woman who lent sugar or watched their kids for 5 minutes. But as someone who had done the thing they all talked about over chai and never dared to do, speak against Malik in front of Malik. Still, she didn't walk around with her chin in the air. She knew how fast people can turn a hero into a villain once the gossip cycle gets bored. At night, when Kabir slept with his school bag as a pillow, she lay awake with her old calculator, going over the terms Vikram had shown her from the bank meeting. Technically, with all the proof they had, Raj could be dragged to court, humiliated in the news, maybe even do jail time. Part of her, the part that still remembered standing at the gate being called a characterless climber, wanted that. Yaar, just once, she wanted to see someone like him stand where she had stood. With everyone staring at his fall. But then she would think of something her father used to say. Half drunk on cheap rum, beta. Revenge also has interest rate. Sometimes you pay more than you get back. When the big meeting finally happened in the boardroom, It was strangely simple. No dramatics. Just a long wooden table. The bank's loan officer, a representative from the workers' union. Vikram sitting straighter than he had in years. And Raj across from him. Eyes ringed with sleeplessness. Asha stood by the wall. Not at the table, but Vikram had insisted she be in the room. They should see who actually did the homework. He had said. The bank officer laid it out. Either the company restructures under strict conditions, or they start liquidating assets. The union leader, a man with calloused hands and a bright red tilak, said softly but firmly, "We will not move from our quarters like cattle. If land goes, it goes with our consent, not our corpses." All eyes turned to Vikram. He looked at his brother for a long moment. That look only siblings share, full of shared childhood and very different choices. Then he spoke. He didn't raise his voice. But nobody looked away. "Raj," he said, "you gambled with this company like it was poker night with your friends. You used my silence and these workers' trust as chips. If we go strictly by law, you will be finished. And maybe on some level you deserve it. But this isn't only about you. This is about the Sinha name. About every worker whose daughter needs a school fee tomorrow. Not a court date." He pushed a folder into the center of the table. "Here is my proposal. You return the money you siphoned. Every rupee. By transferring almost all your shares into a new trust for workers' welfare. You sign a statement for the bank accepting responsibility for the mismanagement. Not hiding behind vague, market conditions. You give a public apology in front of the factory. Not a press release your friends can spin. In return, I will not push for a criminal case. You will leave day-to-day control of Sinha Textiles permanently. You start again somewhere else. With less money but maybe more sense. Take it or leave it." The room went very quiet. You could see the war happening inside Raj. His ego wanted to flip the table. Shout about legal rights. Blame that basti girl again. But the numbers, for once, didn't care about his drama. The bank officer's face was neutral but tired. He had seen too many family businesses eat themselves alive. The union leader's stare was not angry, just steady, like a father who has run out of second chances. Even Savitri, sitting in a corner chair with her pallu pulled tight over her head, said nothing to rescue him this time. Finally, Raja's shoulders slumped in a way Asha had never seen. "If I refuse?" he asked. Voice small. The bank officer answered for Vikram. "Then we proceed. And trust me, Mr. Sinha, the system will be much less kind than your brother. There is a special kind of humiliation in realizing that the person you considered weak is the only one standing between you and total ruin." Raj signed. His signature shook a little. But it was his. Priya, of course, exploded later in the car, calling it blackmail and emotional manipulation. Threatening to leave him, go back to her parents in Pune. Maybe she did for a while. Maybe she came back. The story moved on without waiting for her tantrums. What mattered was this: by the end of that month, a legal entity called the Sinha Rao Workers' Trust existed on paper. Approved by the bank, with shares transferred, land protected, and a board that, for the first time, included someone from the basti side of the gate. Vikram offered Asha a permanent office job with a proper title and salary that would have made any chawl mother dizzy with pride. She took the role with one condition of her own: a portion of her salary would go directly into a scholarship fund for workers' children. Starting with girls. "If you want to put my name next to yours, sir," she said quietly, "then it should mean something more than just two surnames on a board." Savitri watched this with a complicated expression. One evening, she came to the small office they had given Asha near the accounts department. Carrying a steel tiffin. "I made Karela the way my mother taught me," she said, almost shy. "You look tired. Eat." It was a small thing. An old Brahmin lady serving bitter gourd to a Dalit girl in a glass cabin that used to belong to some junior manager. But in this country, you and I both know, these are the small earthquakes that make bigger ones possible. Kamla, too, had her own reckoning when her role in hiding certain letters and gossiping to Raj came out. She wasn't thrown on the street, but she was quietly moved out of the Sinha house to a smaller job caring for elderly residents at a budget old age home the trust helped fund. Asha visited once with Kabir, bringing laddus on Diwali. Kamla fussed over the boy. avoided Asha's eyes for most of the visit. Then finally muttered, "I was scared, Betty, scared they would throw me out if I didn't take their side. I forgot that there was another side. My own conscience." Asha didn't give a big lecture. She just said, "Fear makes us all small. Kamla ji, at least now we know how it feels from both sides." And her own life? It didn't suddenly turn into fairy tale. The chawl room was still small. The water line still dry some mornings. But there was a desk now where she studied at night for her professional accounting exam. Highlighters spread next to Kabir's homework. On the wall, next to the old college ID, a new framed document hung, Consultant, Sinha Rao Workers Trust. When neighbors teased Kabir, "Array, now you'll forget us when you become big man's son," he would puff his chest and say, "My ma works for everyone in the factory, not just big man." That, more than any title, was the promotion she carried in her heart, not from cleaner to accountant, but from invisible to accountable, to her son, to those workers, and yes, even to a fallen brother who needed someone to set a line he could not cross again. A year later, if you walked past the old iron gate of Sinha Textiles on a Sunday morning, you wouldn't see the same place. The looms still roared on working days. The dust still settled on ledgers the way it always had. But there was a new board at the entrance now, screwed in a little crooked by the workers themselves, Sinha Rao Trust for Workers and Families. The first time Asha saw her name there in blue paint, next to the Sinha name that once felt like a different planet, she didn't laugh or cry. She just stood quietly with Kabir's small hand in hers, feeling something heavy in her chest finally put down its bags. "Ma, that's our name?" he asked, eyes wide. "Half of it is ours. Half is theirs," she said, smiling. "The important thing is, it belongs to all of us now." Inside the compound, the old workers' quarters were still standing. They had been patched up, some roofs repaired, one row freshly painted by volunteers from a college who came after seeing an article about the trust. A section of the land that Raj once wanted to sell had been cleared and turned into a small community hall and classroom. On weekdays, it was used for tuition for workers' children. On Sundays, women learned basic accounting, English, even how to read the very bank forms that used to scare them. Asha often sat at the front with a whiteboard marker, explaining interest rates in simple Hindi. "Bank is not God, okay," she would joke. "You can ask questions, they don't throw you out of heaven." The women laughed, but you could see their shoulders straighten a little each week. Vikram, too, was different. He still had bad days when his legs ached and the memories of the accident came back like unwelcome guests. But he walked now with a stick, not just inside his room but across the factory floor. Once a month, he and Asha went together to a nearby college to speak to commerce students about ethics and caste and what happens when you pretend certain people don't exist until they save your life. The first time he told a hall full of young people, "My biggest auditor was a woman from the basti who cleaned my floors." You could see the shock, then the slow, thoughtful nods. After one such event, as they stepped out into the parking lot, Asha noticed a familiar figure standing near the back, under a neem tree, hands in pockets. Raj. His hair was shorter, his shirt simpler, no watch that screamed for attention. He had opened a small textile trading shop in another part of the city. Starting again with no driver, no private cabin, just a ledger and a stool. For a moment, Asha felt that old anger rise, the memory of his words at the gate. The humiliation in front of everyone. She could have turned away, she could have made a scene. Instead, she just met his eyes for a second. He raised his hand in a small, awkward half wave, the kind you give when you know you have lost the right to a full greeting. She didn't wave back, but she didn't look away either. Later, when one of the professors asked her, "Don't you want him to pay more? Prison, case, all that?" She shrugged. "He already pays," she said softly. "Every day he has to live knowing the brother he pitied stood up without him. And the woman he insulted is invited to speak where he isn't. That is enough Emmy for his ego." It wasn't forgiveness in the filmy sense, where enemies hug and violence play. It was something quieter, choosing not to drink poison just because someone else offered it. Back in the chawl, life still had its daily fights, water timings, school fees, electricity cuts, But Kabir now sat at a proper wooden desk in the corner. A second-hand one donated by the trust. On the wall above, next to Asha's college ID and her new qualification certificate, there was another small frame, a newspaper clipping with a grainy photo of her standing beside Vikram and a group of workers under the new trust board. The headline said, "From Basti to Boardroom, the cleaner who helped save a factory." Some evenings, younger girls from the lanes would come and ask shyly, "Didi, can we also study like you?" And she would tell them the truth. It's not easy. People will call you names when you stand where they didn't plan for you to stand. But if you keep your head clear and your heart clean, one day even those people will use your name to explain what courage means to their children. A few months later, during Ganesh Chaturthi, the workers decided that instead of bringing their idol only into the main office like every year, they would also take the aarti into the community hall and the chawl lanes. Savitri came in a simple cotton sari, no jewels, and stood in Asha's tiny room for the first time, folding her hands in front of the small Ganesh idol on the shelf that Kabir had decorated with marigold. "I used to think God lived only in big houses," she said quietly. "I was wrong." Asha didn't know what to reply, so she just passed her the aarti thali. Sometimes shared silence heals more than well-crafted apologies. If you ask me what the real miracle in this story was, I wouldn't point to the day Vikram stood up from his chair or the day the bank officers stopped threatening to take the land. Those were big moments, yes, but the deeper miracle was slower and less glamorous, a rich man learning to walk without pride, a poor woman learning to stand without shame, and a factory learning to see that worth is not stamped on someone's surname or skin but written in how they show up when it really counts. In a country where people still whisper, "Log kya kahenge," before every brave decision, a girl from the basti and a man from the mansion chose to ask a different question: what will I think of myself if I stay silent? That one question turned a cleaner into a trustee, turned workers into stakeholders, turned a scandal into a second chance for everyone watching. And maybe that's the part you and I need to carry with us after this story ends. You don't have to be born a Sinha or a Rao to change the script. You just have to be willing, one day, to knock on a door everyone says is not your place, and when that door opens, to speak the truth even if your voice shakes. The rest, as Asha would tell you with a small smile over a cup of cutting chai, life will handle if you don't run away from your own courage. At its heart, Asha and Vikram's story is not just about a factory, a lawsuit, or a brother's downfall. It is about what happens when ordinary people stop protecting lies and start protecting their own conscience. Many of us in India grow up hearing, "Chup raho, log kya kahenge," and we learn to swallow insult, injustice, even open prejudice, just to keep a fragile peace. But this story reminds us that silent suffering is not peace. It is a slow poison. Asha is not a hero because she shouted the loudest. She is a hero because she chose to see clearly when everyone else was looking away, and she dared to speak when it would have been easier to lower her head. Vikram is not strong because he finally walked. He is strong because he learned to walk without pride, to admit he was wrong, and to stand beside someone the world called lower than him. In our own lives, most of us will never stand on a stage with a microphone. But every day we stand in smaller courts, inside our homes, at work, in our own hearts, where we must decide whether to tolerate toxic relationships, caste bias, gossip and greed, or to step away and say, "Enough." As the saying goes, true gold fears no fire, and you reap what you sow. When we choose fairness, self-respect, and compassion, we may lose some people, but we find ourselves. If this story touched you, I invite you to share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever faced a moment where you had to break your own silence? If you feel this kind of storytelling should reach more people, please like the video, share it with someone who needs courage today, and subscribe so you don't miss the next tale full of drama and reflection. May you find calm after your storms, and the quiet strength to stand where your heart knows you truly belong.